Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the amazing Andy Connor. Andy, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, Ken. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It is an honor to have you here. But before we talk about the reason why you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you here a little bit. Andy is from Glasgow, Scotland. He is the host of Road to Nowhere, a horror, sci-fi, and comic book movie podcast. So, Road to Nowhere, how did that get started, and about how long have you been doing the podcast for?
So it's had a couple of different iterations. It started during the first lockdown, as a lot of podcasts do. I got in contact with someone I know who does a soccer podcast over here, and they were looking to relaunch theirs under the title Warped Footage. So it kind of started out as that, with me partially hosting and kind of guesting as well. And that kind of died a death almost. It just kind of frittered away. But I'd made kind of contacts through that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think maybe a year after that, so about 2021, we started up, me and my co-host Larry, who I think has maybe been on with yourselves before. And yeah, it's kind of started as just a general movie chat, and we've got a bit of a format to it now. I'm terrible at describing it, so bear with me. We basically pick an actor, movie from back catalogue of that actor, and then pick an actor from the movie we've just watched and go into their back catalogue and kind of jump between different movies that way. Keeps it a bit different. We also have a subsection called Direct to Knowhere. We invite a guest on, and they talk about one of their favourite directors and 3 movies from that. And that's kind of taken actually a bit more of the main focus recently. I've just started a new job, so I've been a bit lazy with my editing, but there's a couple of episodes due to come out for that, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, and it's amazing because like you said, a lot of it started during the lockdown, but it's amazing how such a bad, terrible thing actually sparks so much good, because a lot of the friends I know, a lot of the people I know that are podcasting or YouTubing started during that lockdown when they had nothing else to do, and they found a really big passion that has stuck with them for a long time. So like I said, I try to find the best parts of everything. If I could have erased that, I would. A lot of people, got very sick. A lot of people lost their lives, but you got to try to find the positives. And, we were able to bring a community together and start a lot of different things. So what does the future hold for Road to Nowhere?
I've got a couple of interviews lined up again for Direct to Nowhere episodes. I have got some screeners for Fright Fest to do reviews for it as well. The Fright Fest is on at the end of August. I don't know how aware you are of Fright Fest. It's a kind of London indie movie style type thing. And then I've got a couple of director interviews coming up for that as well, and I also do interviews for the Geek Show, which is YouTube based. So some stuff for that as well coming up.
That's awesome, man. And the best way for you guys to stay up to date on all this is to follow Andy on social media, as well as subscribe to the podcast. All those links are down in the description. So make sure you're following him on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast so you can stay up to date on all the things that they are working on. Now, we know what you're doing now and what you got going on in the future, Andy. But for a second here, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Andy, the first horror movie you watched was?
It was The Terminator.
God damn, I love this movie. I always argue that not only is this movie a horror movie, it's a total slasher film. So I'm very excited that I get the opportunity to have this conversation with you. So do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
Oh, so I think potentially about 10 years old, 11 years old. Main reason was because I had got to watch Terminator 2 far too young as well. And that was seen as the kind of gateway into the Terminator. 2 is obviously, I don't know if family friendly is the right word, but it's certainly not as visceral and nasty as the first one. But yeah, it would have been about 10 years old, probably at my grandparents'. That was where I got to see most things that I wasn't meant to. But but far too young, certainly, anyway.
And it's a movie that still holds up today. We just went back and rewatched the Terminator franchise, and part 1 and 2 are like almost perfect. Like, I love both of those films, and part 3 is not a bad film. It goes, quality goes a little down after that, but 1, 2, and 3 are all fantastic films. So we know that the Terminator is a film that's obviously stood the test of time. But what scene would you say it was that affected you the most from the Terminator?
So obviously there's a lot of build up towards him finding the real Sarah Connor. As you said, that's probably the most slasher element of it, where he is literally picking off what he thinks are potential targets. But the scene that really gets me is where it is Matt and Ginger get murdered, and those are Ginger is the real Sarah, if you want to call her that. It's her roommate. And Matt's her boyfriend, but there's obviously throughout, more so I think in the first movie, the cold determination of the Terminator really shines in that. Matt is a big guy. He's well built. He's looks after himself, clearly likes to run about in underwear, and he just throws him about like he's nothing. And brutally murders Ginger as she's crawling away, just without blinking. Arnie at that time, obviously, I think wasn't far off his Mr. Universe titles, so he was huge, and he's just so imposing, and there was just an unflinching grimness to those deaths.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about, how the most slasher part of it is, how he's attempting to get Sarah. And I mean, he's literally going through the phone book to kill every Sarah Connor he can find. So there's nothing more slasher to me than that. That's about as slasher as you can get. He wears a mask to cover his real identity. Like, it's just, it's a fantastic film. Like, yeah, it's a sci-fi, film noir, horror, action. Like, it's a little bit of everything in this film. And we know which scene affected you the most. But what would you say your favorite scene from the film is, Andy?
I think it's the tech noir nightclub scene. It just kind of encapsulated that era, and the style of it. It's quite a Terminator feels like a movie that is dirty. Like, it's obviously not huge budget, and that scene, you can feel the kind of stickiness of the nightclub floors. Yeah. It's hot and sweaty inside, and it's almost the way when Arnold spots Sarah, his eyes almost light up as if he realises that that's the right Sarah Connor. Now, obviously, he's just working off of the phone book. And working off of his not his instincts, but his leads that he's got. But there's just a brightness in his eyes when he's found the real Sarah, and then Kyle Reese comes in swashbuckling and just blows him out the window, and it's great. I just think it's fantastic. It's just the music as well, everything. It just all works as one kind of package.
And it's one of those movies that, I mean, I think what Arnold says, he gets paid like 20 grand per word he says in the movie. And, it's you have this big name guy that doesn't say a word throughout the film, which is the complete opposite of T2. But this movie is in a franchise now. Obviously we have the whole Terminator franchise, and I have a feeling it's going to be between two movies. But when we talk about a franchise, I always ask, which one is your favorite in the franchise?
It's Terminator 2. Terminator 2 is my favorite movie of all time. It has been the one that I've watched countless times. Luckily enough to have seen it on the big screen. I don't know how it is for yourselves, but over here, classic movies getting shown isn't a huge thing. It's not something that happens in a lot of places. There is some smaller chains, smaller cinemas that occasionally do it, but the kind of big multiplexes, it's not something that happens very often. The 25th anniversary, though, they showed the full Unfortunately, they didn't show the director's cut of Terminator 2, which is my preferred cut. But it was great being in the cinema, and it was sold out as well. So yeah, Terminator 2, and it just holds good memories for me from, I said, hiding in my granddad's loft when my mum and dad told me I couldn't watch a certain movie. I would just go there. It was great.
Right. Yeah, you can't watch this. Cool, Mom. Cool, Dad. I'll see you after the weekend.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, we talked about how Terminator is a franchise film now, but remakes, requels, sequels, all the rage in Hollywood. Would you like to see them make an attempt at just remaking, starting over with the Terminator franchise and doing a hard reboot of the first one?
No, I don't think so. I think they should let it lie now, personally. They won't, but they should. They tried it partially with Genesis, which for my money is the worst of the bunch. It was far too shiny. There's just a gleam to it. It was terribly miscast. Jai Courtney as Kyle Reese. Kyle Reese is supposed to be a survivor and scrawny. I know this is the way Hollywood is now with the superhero movies and everyone's massive. But like Michael Biehn wasn't huge. He was malnourished and scarred from the future. Jai Courtney, and I'm not a huge fan of Jai Courtney either. I also thought I like Emilia Clarke, but that didn't work either. And it was a huge mess the way they tried. I can appreciate them trying to do something new, but they just fluffed it massively. My third favourite in the franchise actually is Dark Fate. I really quite like that. I thought that was a nice way to try and make it different, but again, fluffing an ending and fluffing a kind of trying to lead the story forward didn't end, and we're not going to see any more of that. I don't think now. I don't think it made enough money. But yeah, no, I would rather they just left it as is. I get enough enjoyment out of all of them, even Genesis, Terminator, Rise of the Machines is potentially a little bit too comedy heavy for me. The Salvation I saw in Los Angeles in the big theatre in Los Angeles, so that's kind of, again, it holds a special place, whether it's not particularly great. But yeah, they all have their moments, but I think it should just be as it is now. But it won't be. We'll probably find out soon enough. There'll be another one.
It's just like once you start killing Sarah Connor, John Connor, I was like, come on, guys, what are we doing here? Don't do that to me. You're killing me right now.
Yeah. And I get that. I think that was a big criticism of Dark Fate. The Terminator movies had never been about John.
Right.
He was almost the MacGuffin. He was almost the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. It's always been Sarah's story, and I can understand why they've tried to do that, but then they've pushed the focus too far onto Mackenzie Grace and her characters. It was good, but I say third best. It's not a huge bar to go off of.
Well, I mean, we talked about, the OG Terminator and what that film means to you. And obviously the whole franchise is super important to you. But I do want to throw you a curveball here for a second. My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Andy? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh, favorite? It goes between two, and they're both Spanish language. It just depends on the type of mood I'm in. So, Rec, the original Barcelona found footage from 2006 or 2008, taking a blank. If I'm wanting pure scares and 100% just kind of adrenaline boosting horror, it would be Rec. The other one is The Orphanage, J.A. Bayona. If I want a horror movie that is creepy and also has the tension and a few jump scares, but has an incredible amount of heart and gets me at the end, then that would probably be my choice. So it's quite hard. It's between those two anyway.
Right.
Definitely.
When, Rec obviously got the American remake, which was just not very good, Quarantine. But The Orphanage has one of the best jump scares ever with those kids. So if you guys haven't seen those movies, can't recommend them enough. They're both very fine films. So Man, Andy, I've had a great time talking to you about your first horror movie, your favorite horror movie. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to Terminator. And what we're going to do
Mhm.
here is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. All we're doing here, Andy, is ranking the Terminator on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Andy, what would your ranking of the Terminator be?
First viewing, I would probably go for a 4.5. I'll go 4
Mhm.
because it did have a huge impact on me, but it disappointed me in comparing it to Terminator 2.
Sure.
I think it also scared me a bit too much for that age. Yeah, a bit of a 4, but that's more my own personal. Now, if I was to watch it now as an adult, as a first time, it would probably be a 5. But yeah, just at that time, bouncing off a Terminator 2.
Yeah. And I said it at the beginning, guys, and I'm going to say it again because I really think that you should. All of Andy's social media links are in the description, as well as the podcast, Road to Nowhere. So make sure you're following him on social media. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast so you can follow along with all the things that they have coming up for you in the future. Andy, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Uh,
Problem.
Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. All our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.